And we rode the bus. It took us about an hour and a half to ride the bus from where we got picked up to all winding around, all picking up all these kids doing the school and coming back. It was twice a day, about an hour and a half on the bus. And Mr. A.J. Patricic was the bus driver. Good old Czech guy, and he was a teacher, and his daughter Doris Patricic was in my class, and of course she'd always sit behind her dad on the bus, and of course some of the kids on the bus would be a little rowdy. Of course, not me, of course, but I'm not saying I was probably in it too, but because I just started developing some friendships, and we'd get a little loud and a little boisterous, and you just didn't do things those days. You kind of kept things kind of quiet. Miss Patricia was trying to operate that bus and keep order, and he'd be driving, and Doris would turn around and look around, and we knew what she was doing because she would, when they'd get home that night, she'd probably say, "Daddy, so and so and so and so and so, there's the one making the noise." And so when they get on the bus next morning or so, well, he'd tell them, "The boys, the ones involved, you boys better be quieting down." So kind of ruled things with an iron fist, but that was just kind of the way it was. But getting back to my studies, I was so far behind. I was so far behind. And I remember Mr. Kerr was real good to me, and had a teacher named Miss December and a few others. And of course the Hilcher boys were going to school there, and all high school, and they were good old boys there, and they, most everybody knew them. And I heard later on that I wasn't doing very good. It was a tough road. I couldn't keep up my studies like I should. But what should have happened was I should have been retained in the 7th grade. That would have been a blessing, because this goes back to when I was promoted from the 1st to 3rd grade in Bodark. And of course that would have thrown me another year behind, but when I got to the Grange, I heard later on that Warren and David talked to the teachers about, my situation, where I'd come from this little school, and I was behind, and I guess maybe the teachers in a way felt sorry for me, which I'm sure they did, but it was a mistake in the sense that I should have been kept back, because my mom and dad wouldn't have minded, and it would have been a lot better for me. I think I'd have been a lot better student throughout my remaining years in high school, because I was struggling all the time. So anyhow, that's kind of how that weighed, and we at the dances they had a big dance hall at Holman too, and I did a little bit of this at the Billings, if I remember correctly, but I was pretty young. But and of course they tore down the dance hall, and I was too young then. But at the Holman they still had a dance hall, and they had picnics and stuff. And back in those days, of course, everything was in bottles. You didn't have cans, so I'd go around and pick up bottles, and even saved enough money, got me a flashlight, and I'd go out between the cars at night. And of course, people would drop beer bottles and a few soda water bottles, mostly beer bottles. I'd go around and pick them up, and I don't remember how much I got for them when I brought them in. If it was a penny or 2 or 3, I don't remember. But I made a little money picking up soda water and beer, mostly beer bottles. That's what I did. So we went river fishing down, and I remember Bubba came down, and because Dad was working all the time, bless his heart, that's all he knew. He just didn't, he said, "You take the tractor, y'all drive on down to the river." And like I said, I know Bubba was there. It might have been somebody else, but I think it was 3 people, but I can't think of who else the third one was. So we drove that almost brand new tractor down there not too long after we moved down there, drove it down the river, and we spent the night, and where the river kind of narrowed, well, I think there was an old boat that was down at the river, just like a beat up old canoe, but anyway, we took fishing line. They didn't have fishing line like nylon line, it was strictly fishing string line. We went across the river and either found a tree or we took a stake and stuck it down the ground and pounded the ground, and we strung that line across the river, and then we put down lines, and then we individual lines off of this main line about 6 inches, and then it had a fish hook, and we put them about maybe 2 feet apart, and then we'd put bait on them. Then we'd do this all the way across the line to the other side and tie it up over there, and we put a turkey bell on there, and we call them trot lines is what we did. You could actually put a rock on them and throw them out away from you. You don't want to get caught with a hook. You can throw them out there in the water. I think we had a few of those too, but this line was all the way across, and when a fish would get on there, well, it was a fairly decent sized fish, well, that bell would ring, and so anyway, that darn bell rang, and we went out in that little boat and took those lights, carbide lights, and had about a 5-pound yellow cat on there, and I don't remember how many fish we caught. It wasn't a whole lot, but anyhow, we did that, and next morning I think we took along a few eggs and a little bit of bacon, and we had breakfast down there, and that was a kind of a special time because we got to go fishing, and man, I come back and I was so proud of that yellow cat because Bubba let me have that one. I don't remember how much we caught, but he was the biggest one, and my daddy skinned that yellow cat, and we were just we had a fish fry. That was pretty exciting. But like I said, Bubba, and it was just a neat experience that we got together and do that. And speaking of turkey bells, we had get back these turkeys. I said turkeys are not too bright. When the turkeys when they hatch their younger turkeys, well, they would kind of take off in a group, and they would go through the fields and go down the pasture, usually hunting for grasshoppers. And we put a turkey bell on it, on one of the big toms or one of the big hens, so we could listen for that bell every now and then and kind of figure out where they're at, because we just never know. And turkeys have a bad habit of, when it starts raining, they don't keep moving, they just squat down. And so if you don't keep up with them, and if there's a rain coming, you got to get them out of there, because sometimes they just squat down in kind of a low-lying area, and here comes the water, and you lose all your turkeys. So that's one thing we did too, and that's why we had turkey bells. We used those for fishing and putting around turkeys, but that's what they were called, was turkey bells. But getting back to being involved in LaGrange, well, the coach wanted me to come out for football in my freshman year, but I couldn't because I didn't have a ride home, and because I had chores to do, and it really never entered my mind too much. But I kind of like to might would have done it, but you had to have a ride home, and that was a long way. I didn't have a ride home. Nobody in the Yocha boys, they came home. They didn't play football either. And most of the boys that played football were in sports actually lived in town. Most of them that lived out any distance didn't get involved that much, except they were involved with raising animals, which for FFA and things like that, which had a great teacher, Dr. Jackson in LaGrange. He was just an outstanding FFA teacher. And my coach was named Coach Lowprice. So anyway, I didn't go out for anything to speak of, but when we lived down in Holman, well, they had a Firestone store in Wyman, and they carried tires, of course, mostly auto store, but they carried a few sporting things, not much in those days, but they carried a few baseball gloves, and I saved a little money, but I don't know if Dad helped me. It wasn't a whole lot, but I bought a baseball glove, and boy, I was so proud of that, because I listened to in Holman, we had the same setup with the battery and the radio and the antenna and the wire across, and I would listen to the baseball games, and when we go to town, well, they would, I could hear it there on the radio in town, and sometimes they'd show some highlights at the picture show baseball games, just a few little snips. But so I fell in love with the Cleveland Indians. That was my #1 team, and then the Boston Red Sox. And man, I just couldn't imagine, because the announcers in those days were really phenomenal, because it wasn't TV where you saw it. They had to create the game. I mean, you kind of had to live the game with them, and it was pretty exciting. And so I got to name. I could name all those players in those positions for Cleveland. I knew them that well. I still can remember maybe one or two I'm missing, but I knew them. But anyhow, we had the garden out, and it was like a chicken wire fence, and so I took some sticks and a couple boards and made me a deal, kind of like a strike zone. And I'd go back, and I'd just wound up getting a ball or two, and I just kept throwing and throwing and throwing and throwing into that, trying to get in that zone. And of course, I unfortunately wore out the wire a little bit, and I had to patch that up all the time. But Dad and Mom let me do that, so that was pretty unique that I got that opportunity, because I was really living that baseball. But